Coming up here on Chicago Bears Now, could the Bears draft the next Khalil Mack in the 2025 NFL Draft? The player we're about to discuss is a pretty interesting one. Let's get into it. I'm Harrison Graham. Welcome into Chicago Bears Now. And listen, I understand when you mutter the words, the next Khalil Mack, that's a big projection, right? You're talking about a guy that has a shot to get into the Hall of Fame. I'm not saying this player we're about to talk about is going to have the career Khalil Mack has had. What I'm saying is where he comes from, his testing, and his college production, it's pretty similar to what Khalil Mack, including the measurements, had coming out of Buffalo. So let's get into it, and that player is Mike Green out of Marshall. And yes, there is off-the-field stuff to discuss with Mike Green. We are going to address that and talk about that as well. But like Khalil Mack, played at a smaller college, very productive at the University of Marshall, was good in 23, broke out in 2024 with a monster season. And like we mentioned, similar measurables and testing to Khalil Mack. And as a football player, again, we'll talk about the off-the-field stuff, and it's a real concern. He is the second best edge in this draft, in my opinion, in terms of just a edge rusher. Like, I like him better than Mykel Williams. I like him better than Shamar Stewart. Abdul Carter's the best. I think this guy is the second best edge rusher in the 2025 NFL Draft. The production last year at Marshall was off the charts, to be completely honest. And, you know, when you have a dominant player like that in a small conference, there's kind of two ways you can look at. Well, the level of competition, which we'll talk about in a minute, but also every team he played in that conference keyed in on him. How do we stop Mike Green? How do we slow this guy down? Double, triple teams, chips with tight ends and backs. No one could do it. He was just a completely dominant player for Marshall. You see the PFF grades, just terrific off the board. 92 overall, 91 pass rush, 90 run defense. Pass rush win rate, 20.2%, which means 1 out of every pass rush snaps, he is beating the guy blocking him. That is a really high number. His run stop rate of almost 10% is fantastic as well. Average is like 5, and he was almost at 10. And Harrison, he played at Marshall. That's not going to translate. Well, he had 2 sacks against Virginia Tech and several more pressures. I think 7 or 8 pressures. He also had a sack against Ohio State, who they deploy multiple NFL offensive linemen. Oh, and he dominated this thing called the Senior Bowl, littered with day 1 and day 2 draft competition. He was so dominant that after 2 days he left on advisement from his agent to avoid injury. So, sure, week in, week out at Marshall, you're not playing Ohio State, but the 2 high-profile games he had against Virginia Tech and Ohio State, he's pretty dominant. Pretty good player. Senior Bowl when you're playing SEC and Big 10, Big 12, ACC players, dominant. Pretty much the best player on the field that week. So I'm not saying it's not a concern at all going from Marshall to the NFL, but every time he's gotten a chance to go up against high-level competition, he has more than delivered. He's been one of the best players on the field. I'm just curious what you guys think. After Abdul Carter, who I think is universally viewed as the best edge rusher in this draft, if not best player in this draft, who's your favorite edge? Just pure pass rusher, regardless of scheme fit, because we'll talk about that as well with Mike Green. Does he fit in a Dennis Allen defense? Favorite edge in this draft? I want to hear it from you guys down in the comment section below. A couple of tweets I want to address here. Kurt Benker, former Packers QB, boo, but he had an interesting note here. He said he was studying Mike Green's tape and got Khalil Mack flashbacks, pointed to the measurables and the stats, the build, all that stuff. He said the floor is the Falcons, and that's pretty universally agreed upon, depending on how teams view the off-field stuff, which, again, we're going to get to. Stay tuned. Falcons pick at 15. So I think as a pure player in this draft, most people feel like he's a top 15 guy. Atlanta runs a 3-4, so that scheme probably fits him pretty well. And then Nick Whalen quote tweeting Dane Brugler's 3-cone and short 20-yard shuttle numbers for Green, which, by the way, Green's 3-cone, 99th percentile among edge rushers ever in combine testing history. Look at the names in that tweet. Who's the worst player mentioned in either of those categories? Like Hassan Reddick, Nick Medito? Those are good players. Like, if that's the floor, what you're getting, which again, testing doesn't necessarily mean anything, but the two testing of 3-cone and 20-yard shuttle, that typically translates. Like, if you test that highly in those two drills, typically that translates to the next level. And oh, by the way, Mike Green has good on the field pass rush moves. He has one of the best spin moves I can remember. He has a cross chop as well, despite being 6'3", 250 or so. He plays with a lot of power as well. And to go back to his PFF grades, despite being a little undersized, terrific edge setter, which shows you he's got the strength to defend the run as well. To get further into that Khalil Mack comp with him coming out of Buffalo, very similar, man. These were his combine height, weight numbers, and then Green did the drills at his pro day, which I think at his pro day he was actually 248, so 3 pounds lighter. So maybe that helped his testing, a tick, maybe 1% or so. Both around 6'3", both around 251. 3-cone advantage Mike Green, shuttle slight advantage Khalil Mack, but you're talking about 90th plus percentile in both of those drills for both of those guys. Similar background, small school. Coming into the NFL from lesser competition, but in Mac's case, being a great player right away, and Mike Green, who I think has a chance to do that as well. Now, in a minute, we'll talk about does he fit in a Dennis Allen defense, plus the off-the-field concerns that teams are going to have to address. But speaking of the draft, we got Bears draft hats available. Chatsports.com/Bears draft hats. Click and shop today. Tons of different styles, snapbacks, fitted, non-fitted, flat bill, curve bill. You've got the Chicago flag emblem. You've got them without the emblem, whatever your flavor is. I like the variety of hats this year, different looks that the NFL came up with, so pretty cool stuff. Chatsports.com/Bears draft hats. Get one today so you get it in plenty of time before the 2025 NFL draft gets here in late April. Quick on-the-field comparison when it comes to Mike Green. I mentioned, despite being a little undersized, he's an excellent run defender. He sets the edge and wins with power in addition to quickness. And as a pass rusher, very violent player, also has speed. I mentioned the variety of pass rush moves. He's got 2 distinct ones already with a cross chop and a spin move. He can win with power as well. Now, that part of it will probably be a little tougher to win consistently with that power as a pass rusher in the NFL. But that was on full display. I know it was 1 rep, but remember when he put Josh Connerly on his ass, just bull rushed him at the Senior Bowl? Yeah, that's kind of what I'm pointing to. When he's played against high-level competition, he has shown what he is as a player. Now, is he a scheme fit? That's a fair question to ask. Dennis Allen, historically, wants bigger, longer, stronger. I think he's strong enough, but guys that fit that bill, 6'4" and taller, 33, 34-inch arms. Mike Green has 32-inch arms. That is one distinction between him and Mack. Mack had 33 and a quarter-inch arms. Green has 32, which is 9th percentile among edge rushers. That is legitimately lower than you would like, even me. Now, that doesn't completely turn me off. I don't think that matters as much as an edge rusher as it does for an offensive tackle, but it's a real thing, and clearly certain coaches like Dennis Allen, especially 4-3 scheme coaches, that stuff does matter. I will freely admit, if you're talking about just pure scheme, you'd probably rather have this guy in a 3-4 than a 4-3. But I also go back to 2016 when the Dallas Cowboys took Taco Charlton, who was a bigger, stronger edge than T.J. Watt because he was a better scheme fit. T.J. Watt is going to the Hall of Fame. Taco Charlton is probably selling tacos somewhere. Sometimes you just got to throw on the tape and be like, is this guy a damn good player or not? Because, to me, I watch Mike Green and I watch Shamar Stewart and Mykel Williams. I think Mike Green is a far better football player. Now, admittedly, if those other two develop with their size and length, especially in a 4-3, their ceiling in this defense probably is higher. But there's also a lot of evidence that shows a guy like Shamar Stewart with his lack of production and pass rush win rate, that typically doesn't turn on its head in the NFL. They don't all of a sudden become elite pass rushers. Doesn't mean they can't be good players, but especially in Stewart's case, history tells us he's probably an average at best pass rusher and a good run defender. Mike Green has a chance to be an excellent pass rusher and run defender because the data tells us that. Doesn't mean it'll happen. The draft is always a crapshoot, but I would rather take the productive guy. I feel like in the past, the Bears just, he's got the measurables. Karan Amagaji. Can the guy play or not? This guy can play. There's no question about it. Subscribe to the channel if you want Bears off-season coverage every single day, multiple videos per day. We got you covered here on this show. The draft is getting closer and closer, so we'll continue to pump out draft content as well. Okay, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Mike Green has been accused of sexual assault twice, not just once, twice. And that's a big deal for me and for a lot of these NFL teams because I just don't – I will not defend that behavior. It will never happen. Now, to his credit, he openly spoke about it at the NFL Combine. And by the way, one of those accusations in high school and one in college. So you don't love that either. Like at two different places he's been accused. So it's admittedly it's a potential major problem. And if you're uncomfortable with it, if you don't get an answer you're satisfied with among these teams, which, by the way, has never been charged, then you probably have to pass on him, especially in the first round. Here's what he had to say about it at the Combine, and to his credit, he openly spoke about it, whereas most agents would probably advise these guys not to. He said, look, there's accusations out there. I've never been questioned. I assume he's talking about by legal authorities. I've never been asked. You know what I'm saying? Like, nobody ever asked me a question about what happened before I departed from Virginia. It was just accusations that caused me to leave from there. Whether that's true or not, who knows? Did Virginia kind of push him out the door? That's the type of research these teams have to do. Throughout this process, I've been rising higher and higher. That should tell you everything you need to know. I've been telling the truth. I have no concerns, and I have no problem with talking to these teams about it because I know who I am and I know the truth. Now, look, if you're one of these teams, I don't think you just take Mike Green's word for it. How much research can you do? Well, if you really like the player, you better do a lot. Like, you got to talk to his teammates. You got to talk to his coaches. You got to talk to people he grew up with, teachers. Like, this is a guy, if you're taking him, in the Bears case, at number 10 or in a trade down, like, this is a guy that could be a face of your franchise. You can't take him if you have any doubt whatsoever. Now, are you going to get the complete truth? I don't know if that's possible in a situation like this. It's a lot of he said, she said. There's never been to my knowledge, something that led to a charge. It's been accusations, so innocent until proven guilty. But the court of public opinion is very real, especially in 2025. Like, the team that takes him will probably get some flack for it based on the allegations. We know the Bears value character under Ryan Poles. The only guy they've taken in free agency or the draft that we knew had a bit of a reputation that wasn't great, not even necessarily off the field, but just not great character in terms of his reputation, was Nate Davis. There was rumors out there he didn't like to practice. Well, that turned out to be the case. So I think if you take him, you have to assume that these guys did a lot of homework. I don't think Ryan Poles would take Mike Green if there was any doubt in his mind that the character stuff was a problem. So teams are going to look into this heavily. They should. I think you question Mike Green directly very hard. I think you push him on this, and what's his body language? Is he not looking you in the eye when he's answering these questions? I'm not Inspector Gadget here, but I think body language when you're addressing these type of things, which he said, look, I'm comfortable talking to teams. He talked about it for several minutes at the Combine, which I give him credit for. But you better believe every draft meeting he has with the team, it's getting brought up, and he's probably getting peppered, and he should because you got to answer for this stuff. Even if you're completely innocent, and in the back of your mind, you're like, God, this is such a waste of time because I know I didn't do anything wrong. That's just the game, man. Like, these accusations that are out there, you got to answer for them. So it's a tough one. I love the player. I wasn't there for any of it. Neither were any of you, I assume. That's up to these teams, and for Mike Green to convince these teams and people in his circle that it's not an issue and it's not going to be an issue moving forward. Would you be open to drafting Mike Green at number 10 overall? Type Y for yes, type in for no. Because, again, the player himself, I think, is the second best edge rusher in the draft. I really, really do. I can't speak to the off-the-field stuff. I wasn't there. I don't know all the details. That's up to these teams. But if you're talking about purely the player, I do think he's a fringe top 10 player in this draft. I agree with Benkert. I think Atlanta at 15, just purely based on the player, it's probably the floor for him. Does he fit the Dennis Allen prototype? Not typically, but I also think he's a damn good player. And I think sometimes teams just look at the wrong things. Like, can he play? Can he get to the quarterback? Can he stop? Can he stop the run? He can do all that stuff. If he checks the off the field questions, if he checks those boxes off, you could do a lot worse than Mike Green at 10 or via a small trade down. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Chicago Bears Now. We'll see if the Bears are in or out on Mike Green. Again, if there's any question at all about the sexual assault stuff, you have to pass on the player. Absolutely. So we'll see where it goes, but man, he is a talented player.